Welcome, everybody. Another major outgoing, sort of last minute in a way, accomplishment for the Biden administration. We do have a ceasefire and hostage deal with Israel and Hamas. The question, as is always the case with these deals, how durable will it be? Will it really get off the ground, or will something interfere? There's already questions about that. And who is responsible, which is a subject that is already generating significant interest. So let's start with the terms. The Associated Press has a good write-up, which we will link to about this. And it says, if the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal goes according to the current draft, fighting will stop in Gaza for 42 days. Dozens of Israeli hostages and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners will be freed. In this first phase, Israeli troops will pull back to the edges of Gaza. Many Palestinians will be able to return to what remains of their homes as stepped-up aid will flow in. The question is if the ceasefire will survive beyond that phase. That will depend, the Associated Press writes, on even more negotiations meant to begin within weeks. In those talks, Israel, Hamas, and the U.S., Egyptian, and Qatari mediators will have to tackle the tough issue of how Gaza will be governed, with Israel demanding the elimination of Hamas. Without a deal within those 42 days to begin the second phase, Israel could resume its campaign in Gaza to destroy Hamas, even as dozens of hostages remain in the militants' hands. Hamas has agreed to a draft of the ceasefire deal. Israeli officials say details are still being worked out. Details could change. The whole deal could, of course, fall through. So here are the specific terms of phase one. Hamas will release 33 hostages, including female civilians and soldiers, children and civilians over 50. Israel will release 30 Palestinian prisoners for each civilian hostage and 50 for each female soldier. Fighting will halt. Israeli forces will move out of populated areas to the edges of the Gaza Strip, and displaced Palestinians will begin returning home as more aid will come in. Then we have phases 2 and 3. And one of the critical questions was, are there guarantees that the Israeli hostages that are part of phase one are alive? The implication is that they are, because phase 3 includes bodies of deceased Israeli hostages exchanged for bodies of deceased Palestinian fighters. The implication, the assumption, is that if that is outlined specifically for phase 3, then in phase 1, everybody is talking about hostages that are alive to be released by Hamas. What some of the reporting I'm reading is that one of the things that could really torpedo this would be if assumed living hostages turn out not to be so. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We will see. President Biden, flanked by Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking yesterday. Here is President Biden.
And the Secretary of State. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon, because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas.
Okay, and then further from President Biden.
I'd also note this deal was developed and negotiated under my administration, but its terms will be implemented for the most part by the next administration. In these past few days, we've been speaking as one team.
So that statement was taken to mean it is Trump who achieved this. Of course, that is not what Joe Biden said, and we are going to get back to that. But this very quickly became a subject of focus. Who gets credit for the deal? And Biden was asked this when wrapping up by a reporter.
Thank you.
Who gets credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Okay. So the question, of course, would Trump take credit? The answer we quickly found out is yes, and I want to talk about that next. Data brokers are continually collecting extensive details about your online behavior, address, phone number, email, financial information, even political views.
This sensitive information about you can easily be found on public data search sites by anybody, could be an ex, could be an employer. And these brokers sell the data to other businesses and even government agencies like the FBI and NSA, who can buy it in bulk to surveil Americans without a search warrant. Scammers and spammers also get your details from these lists, and that's why you get the text messages and the calls and the emails. But you can stop it. Our sponsor, Incogni, will send removal requests to data brokers who are legally obligated to comply. If any of your information remains online, Incogni will follow up and ensure that it's taken down. Incogni keeps you informed every step of the way, and it just saves you countless hours of work that would be nearly impossible to do on your own. I use Incogni, and what they've managed to do is remarkable. Go to incogni.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman for 60% off. The link is below.